Okay, look, I'm not complaining. I know many people would be thrilled to live somewhere warmer, but I live in a climate which, if I'm entirely honest, somewhat disagrees with my, Scottish blood. My pasty skin, my, predisposition for basement dwelling. More on basement dwelling in a little bit, as it happens, but whatever you want to call it, there is a part of me that finds myself longing for colder weather, particularly as it starts to get warmer and warmer. There will be days in the coming months where there will be some oppressive heat, and I will wish I could be far away in some snowy alpine lodge. But given that that's probably pretty unlikely, I might have to make do with escaping there some other way. Enter Above the Snow from developer Above the Desk, which might just provide a little bit of that alpine magic from the comfort of my own desk, just as long as I pump up the aircon high enough. There is a lot going on in Above the Snow. The first thing players are presented with are two game modes to pick between: the campaign, which has a lengthy story attached to it and is recommended for first-time players, and the Endless Winter mode, effectively a more open version without any story missions, where you'll start with the same shoddy shelter, but try to build it up without worrying about any pesky narrative getting in the way. With some incredibly important and quite unfortunate caveats that I'll get onto later, I would agree with the developers and also recommend the campaign, as even if you wanted to skip through all those story elements, the guidance it gives you through its missions adds a lot to the experience. Therefore, this review will be looking primarily at that version, the campaign. Regardless of which option you pick, however, the core gameplay is largely the same. You have 3 different layers, each larger than the one before it, to work within: the interior of the shelter, the exterior, and then the trail map. You spend most of your time split relatively evenly between the interior and that trail map, with occasional visits to the exterior as well for a handful of tasks that you'll need to stay on top of. Each area has quite different gameplay mechanics, and I was perhaps a little skeptical of that going in. I think there's the potential for that to make the game feel disjointed, or that by having those different sections, rather than focusing on just one, each could end up lacking depth individually. There might be a small amount of that, but I'd say those concerns were largely unfounded. So, what do you do in each? Well, firstly, you've got the shelter, or lodge, or hotel itself, the interior where your visitors eat and sleep and entertain themselves for 2 days before they head out on their expeditions, with the exception of the basement, as that's being used as the dwelling for your handful of workers. See, I told you I'd get back to that basement dwelling thing. This starts out as a rundown shell of a building, with derelict floors and piles of broken furniture, and it's up to you to restore it to its former glory. You do that by placing items, primarily to boost one of 3 values: comfort, storage, or entertainment. Each of those has its own rating from 0 to 5 stars, and depending on the overall reputation of your establishment, which also has its own star rating, you'll need to ensure that each is up to the appropriate standards. In the first instance, it's incredibly likely that you'll have to squeeze any visitors into an array of bunk beds on the ground floor. They won't mind that, as they're not exactly expecting much from your sub-1-star lodgings, but eventually you'll begin to free up rooms on the first and second floors, which you can then fill with more luxurious furniture as you unlock it over the course of the game. The economy of all that is very basic. Better furniture gives you more points, but costs more wood. Every 10 wood spent on an item gives you 1 point of comfort, storage, or entertainment, depending on what that item is. Chairs, sofas, and beds give comfort, tables and cupboards give storage, things like bookshelves or TVs or chessboards give entertainment. You get the idea. Get enough points in a particular category and you'll earn another half star in it. There are some other considerations for you to worry about: ensuring that there are enough beds for the number of visitors you have, making sure anywhere that those visitors go is well heated by radiators, ensuring you're cooking enough food to feed everybody, and if you really want to impress, you can give your visitors double servings to improve their mood. You can even decorate the lodge in ways that appeal to different types of alpinist to change your clientele, which has an impact on things within the other main area, the trail map. It's largely up to the player how involved they want to get with all of that. If you want, you can certainly work on making everything as beautiful as possible, but alternatively, if you're more interested in just hitting those milestones, you can game it a little bit by, for example, having a room of TVs in the attic that smash your shelter's entertainment value up to 5 stars without a huge amount of effort. If you like, you can headcanon it as one of your workers having a dodgy, stolen TV selling business on the side, which, if we step away from the gameplay and go to the story for just a second, is actually surprisingly easy to do. That's because, perhaps unusually for what is otherwise a very cozy game, the main character here, Francis Harland, is a wanted criminal working off his debt to a mob boss. This isn't your typical grandpa left you his farm story. That mafioso's brother is the old man who's let the lodge fall into disarray and becomes part of your core team, all of whom seem to have varying degrees of problems in their past that they're not quite able to escape from. It's certainly an interesting quirk to the game, it's all written well enough for what it is, but I have to admit that I did find myself rushing through some parts that felt they were dragging on a bit, because I just wanted to get back to the gameplay, like we'll do now. As mentioned, you're not just restricted to the interior of the lodge, but can also build within its immediate surroundings, in what the game calls the yard. It's perhaps a little unfair to classify this as its own section, as it's arguably more of an extra part to the lodge, where you can place a handful of external buildings, some of which have interactions that you'll occasionally want to check in on. This is the area that you will spend the least amount of time in, and if there was a part that could do with expanding upon, it would probably be here, as you can end up unlocking quite a lot of land, yet have seemingly nothing to do with it, short of putting down a random bench or two in the middle of nowhere. There are a couple of things you do need to do from here, such as sporadic repairs on important buildings that will impact your ability to get upgrades or deliveries if they're not kept well maintained, but unless you're sending Francis off to collect some extra wood, there's not currently a huge amount to do here. Which is fine because the final area is very involved, probably even more so than the inside of the lodge. The trail map is where you'll plan all your paths between the shelter and the surrounding points of interest. The main reason you do this is for your visitors. They'll come to you with a particular place they want to visit, and you'll need to make sure you have a route set up before they head out, lest they leave disappointed. As your reputation increases, the places they'll want to visit become more difficult to reach until you're scaling the highest peaks and reaching the very edges of the map. Depending on the type of alpinist they are, they'll want different things from those routes. Some, casual strollers and nature fans, want nice relaxing walks with forests and vista points. Others are more interested in steep slopes and more difficult climbs. Again, the game is quite forgiving here. As long as they can get to their location, they're pretty pleased, but if you want to go the extra mile, you can ensure that there are multiple routes that meet the desires of different types, in order to get more money and grow your reputation more quickly. That level of micromanagement wasn't too interesting to me personally, and I found myself earning quickly enough that I tended to prioritize safer routes over trying to appeal to those more extreme climbers. If you're not careful, you can end up with injured climbers who need rescuing. That'll invariably happen even if you do plan everything meticulously, but with too many risky trails, you can end up with multiple climbers to save at once, and if you don't get to them in time, things can go very wrong indeed. Speaking of things going wrong, there are some smaller issues I had with the game, and one which, while hopefully easily fixed, does leave Above the Snow in a precarious position in terms of a recommendation. Those small problems first. Once you've been playing for a while, there are a few extra steps to quite a lot of things that feel unnecessary. Things like having to go back into the lodge to assign a worker to the kitchen, rather than just being able to do it from the trail map. The first few times you have to do it, it's fine, but on the 20th or 30th or 50th occasion, it can get a little annoying. There's also this whole system for renting gear out that I know I haven't spoken about, but which, while a nice little money spinner and a way to make your visitors safer on their travels, has such an irritating micromanagement system for its durability. You have to select each item to move it from the rental shop to your inventory, then move it again from your inventory to the workshop to repair it, then select someone to work in the workshop, then once it's repaired, send it back to the rental shop. If you only had one piece of equipment at a time, then fine, whatever, but you want to have a lot of this stuff. It just feels like all of that could have been skipped, and instead the worker could have just been assigned straight to the shop to repair any items that needed it. You also need to be making constant deliveries, mainly for wood, which requires you to type in 600 or 400 or whatever the maximum capacity of the vehicle is every single time. As with the other two issues, at first it's fine, but eventually you're trying to acquire thousands of units of wood at once. When you've got individual beds that cost 480 and the largest helicopter load you can get is 400, it does start to feel a little bit silly and a little bit tedious, to the point that you wish you could just click a button and set up 10 or 20 full deliveries in a row, as that's more or less what you're having to do anyway. I know I probably sound a bit frustrated, but I want to say that that stuff is forgivable. It's a simulation game, they often have these quirks to them, and while it is a bit eye-roll worthy, it's not like it ruined the game for me. But unfortunately, there was something that did. It's worth reminding you at this point that I was playing on a pre-release build, so I'm hoping these things can be fixed relatively early into release. But each character has their own side story, and at first, one of their side missions had bugged progress for me. I had a character and she needed to go and do something on the trail map. The game was convinced that she was leaving for the mission, she never did that, but was always available to do other things. There wasn't a way to cancel the mission, so it just sort of stayed there, stuck forever. Fine, whatever, it's just a side mission and I can still use the character, so I soldiered on knowing that her quest was probably not going to be completable, but that I'd still be able to finish the main storyline. Then another character's side quest bugged, but this time she left the lodge and just didn't return, which was, less ideal. I waited a few days in-game and it became pretty apparent that she was just never coming back. Again, pretty irritating, more irritating than the last one because I'm now one worker down, but I was still determined to finish the main storyline. Missing characters and incompletable side quests be damned. And that was going well, for a time, until the main quest had a requirement that I needed to use the missing character for, at which point I was then entirely soft-locked. So that's where I left Above the Snow. I gave it a few more days while I leveled up the lodge to 5 stars across the board and linked up some more further flung locations on the trail map, but I wasn't going to be able to progress any further. Obviously your mileage may vary, those issues might never present themselves to you, but for me it was a frustrating end to an otherwise enjoyable experience. I was having a good time, I hope those problems get fixed so I can go back and actually finish it, because without that I would recommend it. On that experience alone, it is difficult to do so. It does happen that I play games that have bugs or issues that render them unrecommendable or unplayable, or in this instance, unfinishable. Often that's severe enough that I just won't put anything out about them. I'm trying to be of the mind that unless there's something untoward or malicious going on, then it's not usually worth putting out negative reviews. But I don't think I'd be so frustrated at those 1.5 game-breaking bugs if I hadn't been really enjoying the game up until that point. We're going back a bit now, but when I reviewed Roots Devour, I mentioned that I had a big problem with that game, and said that I'd put a note in the description if it was ever fixed. So far that's not happened, but based on the rest of Above the Snow and the amount of care and attention that has clearly been put into it, I do have a bit more faith that Above the Desk might see those issues ironed out. So, again, if I catch wind that those bugs are fixed, there will be a note at the top of this video's description saying as much, at which point, knock yourself out, enjoy running your lodge, just as I did for the first 10 hours or so of the game. Until then, I suppose you can risk it if you want. Maybe you can choose not to unlock the side quests as a workaround. Maybe you can just make sure you have a backup save in place before you start them. Hell, maybe you won't encounter those problems at all. For now, Above the Snow is unrated by IndieLoupe, but we'll be keeping our eye on it in the hope that we can, someday soon, recommend it. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. For that thing that was promised. But nobody watched the last video, so nobody really knows that it was promised, so